In this video, we're going to take a look inside an integrated library. Always use the latest released integrated library because that will have the updated footprints and symbols for all the components that we've been using all along. We're going to take a quick look at some of the important fields in the database. Of course, the design item ID is the record name for that component, and then we'll take a look at some of the other fields within the database just to take a look at it. You should get used to exploring all the information that's available to you in the integrated library about each of the components we're going to use. And we'll see, with a couple of mouse clicks, we can find just about any piece of information we need about that part if we've built that integrated library correctly. That's the power of having all the information in one library. Let's take a look inside one of the integrated libraries so we can see some of its features that we're going to use. Now remember, an integrated library is global. That means it's going to be used over multiple circuit board projects, and it's closed. We can't open it up in order to separate out the symbols and the footprints or to do any editing of the database. That means the integrated library has to have been prepared by somebody. We usually call the person that prepares it the librarian. For the integrated libraries that we're using in our class, they've all been prepared by Aditya. And so if you get a chance, you want to go over and thank him for all the hard work he did in putting these very clean integrated libraries together for you guys. I'm going to show you a little later in this series how you can create your own integrated libraries and consolidate a lot of the footprints and the symbols that you have that you're using for other boards into an integrated library and use that. Let's open up the integrated library that is the latest release in this video, which is the '08 release. We find the integrated library, of course, by going to the components. So you have to have, it's good to have the schematic page open. You go to the components, and then here are all the integrated libraries. And by default, we have the miscellaneous ones that ship with Altium. We can uninstall them and keep them out of the way. There are no projects that we're going to be using these integrated libraries for. So in fact, we could go to the operations manager, and we can say, okay, this miscellaneous one, I'm going to remove that. This one, I'm going to remove that. Now just remember where it's located. The default library location for the miscellaneous integrated libraries is in the public documents under Altium, the Altium Designer 20 library, and you can find those integrated libraries. But we're not going to use them for any projects. No reason to have them around cluttering things up. So now whenever we open up Altium, we will only see the two integrated libraries that we've installed, the '07 and the '08. Always start with the latest edition of the integrated library if you're starting a new board. And in fact, if you're building any schematic, even though you might have some parts that were done with the '07, continue with the '08. And I'm going to show you in a later video how we can take a part that was done in an '07 library and transfer its ownership to the '08 so that everybody can be switched over to the '08. And we'll do that in a future video. Let's take a look at the '08 library. And you can see we try to be very good with the naming of the parts. So you'll notice that there's the design item ID. You should by this time know that that is like the title of the book that's written on the spine of the book. That is the name of the record in the database for this part. And so we've tried to use names that are based on the IEEE 315 specification. So the first letter tells you about the kind of component. A C obviously is a capacitor, a D is a diode, an F is a fuse, FB is a ferrite bead, J is a connector, there's JF, which is a female connector, JM is a male connector, L of course is an inductor, we got LEDs, so you can kind of get an idea of what each of these refer to. We also have the description over here. So let's just grab one of these guys. Let's grab the red LED. So if we double click, our icon changes and now it's a red LED, or it's a LED icon. We click once to place it, we can click it multiple times. Escape, of course, to clear our cursor. And now if we want to see the information, the properties of this component, we can double click, opens up the property window for this component, and you can see the designator. So remember, The design item ID is the name of that part in the database. That's what our librarian picked. The designator, again using the IEEE 315 specification, starts with LED as the letters to designate the type. The little question mark means that every time we put an LED down, we'll have a question mark, and Altium, when we tell it to, will automatically number those parts sequentially. So we don't have to worry about changing that reference designator. It's all part of the built-in infrastructure in Altium Designer. The comment line, well, that's something that we can adjust as well. This happens to be the part name. We can change that. And if you wanted to have some other comment, right now you'll see that it's not visible. The little eyeball here has a slash through it. We turn that eyeball on, we make that visible, and now we have the comment visible, and I can move that around on the screen. Personally, I have no need to have that part name on the screen. It's in the database. That's good enough for me. So I'm going to turn the visibility off. And when we look at all the parameters for this part, we can scroll down here, and now under value, Dicha put the value as red, and that's what's visible here. So if we don't want to have the red, we can turn that off. I like that because that tells us, okay, that's the color of the LED, and we have a couple different color LEDs available. These are all fields in the database with values in them. And most importantly, under source is really where is that part located. Remember, this is the symbol. Once we place it into the schematic, some of this information gets embedded with it, and we don't need the integrated library to see it. But to get that linkage with the footprint, we need that integrated library available, especially when we do that pushing into the layout page. And in some cases, in that database for that part is the link to the product page. In this case, here's the URL for the DigiKey page for this part. So you can double click and copy it. You can open up a browser, paste it in the browser, and darned if that part doesn't come up. That's what's cool about the database. There's a lot of valuable information in it. And now from the DigiKey page, you can look at the pricing for it, and you can also pull up the data sheet for it as well. And so if we do a good job in the database for each of the parts, and this is in the integrated library, if we do a good job in there, we have all the information we would ever want about that part available to us 1 or 2 mouse clicks away. Now you'll notice in our file for the schematic or the layout, we don't really have any information about which integrated library did we use. That's where we have to be really careful to keep track of them. You can always find the integrated libraries that were used for your parts. We click on any part, we pull up the properties page for that part. Here it is, the designator. The comment happens to have the value of the capacitor in it, and we go down to the source, and that tells us where is this part located. That particular part on the schematic is in this integrated library. And as long as we have that integrated library as one of the libraries installed, we will always be able to use this part in our schematic and push it into the layout. Open up one of your integrated libraries, take a look at the parts that are in that integrated library, get comfortable with opening up their properties and exploring some of the features of the information in that integrated library.